Ellen Walter. I work for Watch Advocates, and I really wanted to thank you guys all for coming. We have a very diverse audience of people in the room, and the key that we're all sitting so close to this table is because we have a whole slew of people who are online in other countries. So this here is the microphone. They will be able to speak through their computers, and we'll be able to hear them, as well as they will hear everything that's happening in the room. So it's really an interactive process. We did this at a meeting we had in Stockholm not too long ago, and it was pretty successful. We'll see if technology agrees in this room, but that's why we wanted to have you guys sit as close as possible to make sure that voices are heard to those that are online. So welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to just stand behind here for a second. So we are here today to talk about the future of Watch Advocacy. For anyone that was in the presentation, yesterday, we talked a little bit about a landscape that we've done. We heard some really interesting examples. This is actually not a presentation-heavy session. I'm only presenting a couple of slides. And the whole purpose of the session is to talk about what happens in 2016 and beyond. We've got some gaps and some activities that we're going to go through to identify how to fill those gaps. So thank you very much for joining. What I want to do is start off right now and just go over quickly the objectives for today. So we're going to provide a little bit of a snapshot of the history and current situation, but we're not going to repeat a lot of that. Everyone should have, and if you haven't received an email from Jordan with the landscape and the other materials, then I'm terribly sorry about that, but we will make sure that you get all of them after the fact. And so no one needed to necessarily read it before this session. I think the information will be helpful, and that is something that I'm going to mention again at the end. We are looking for feedback, so we will send around after the fact a Word version of that, and we hope that you will provide as much information in that as possible. That's why it said draft when you received it. We by no means, come on in. So by no means we're not even close to being the only actors in advocacy. Clearly there are a ton in the room. And there's a ton online, and even people who weren't even able to participate in any of this process. So we need your feedback, and we want to make sure that we're trying to capture as much as possible so that we can really nicely set up 2016 and beyond for advocacy in the WASH sector. So we're going to do, as I said, an activity around gaps and trying to fill those gaps, and what do we do about that, and then talking about how the contributions of everyone who's in the room on work you're already doing, work you're planning for the future, and any random crazy brainstorming ideas that we can come up with will help fill those gaps. And we'll have active participation from all of the folks online. So thanks everyone who's online. And so here we're going to just do some really basic introductions. I'm going to go over the landscape a little bit. We're going to do some key ingredients. Jordan's going to present that very quickly, and then our gap activity, and then talk about where we all are. Patrick has very kindly agreed to do a synthesis for us. I hope he remembers that he was going to do a synthesis, and if not, he's going to do it anyway, so I'm going to talk about. And then we'll just talk briefly about the next steps, not for the future of Watch Advocacy, but the next steps specifically as wrap-up to the day. So if we can start and just say quickly, name, organization, and the region or country that you're working in. And I know for some folks that's actually a lot of different places. So just give a general idea if you're global, if you're region specific, or if you're one country specific, or even subnational in a particular area. So I'm Ellen Walter. I'm the Sustainability Director of Watch Advocates, and we are global.
I'm Hope Randall. I'm Digital Communications Officer for the Disease Diarrheal Disease Initiative at PAT, and because we're digital here.
I'm Jane Mulumba. I work with IRC in Uganda, so we are both global and country.
Lisa Schechtman, Director of Policy and Advocacy with WaterAid America. U.S., but also global.
Erin Green, I do global health and water policy work at Interaction. So DC based.
And global.
Our members are global.
Yeah, they've got 100 of them. Yeah. John Sparks, Millennium Water Alliance, director. I'm the director of Advocacy, and we have 16 members who work in 90 countries. So we are global, and we obviously do a lot in DC.
Let's go this way, and then we'll come around to the middle. So Samuel, go ahead.
Okay, sorry that I'm leaving you for another conference.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm Samuel Utiara. I'm the Water Operations Director for Waterism.
Well, I'm Stephanie Ogden. I'm the Senior Water Policy Advisor with CARE, and I'm also global.
I'm Valerie Gava. I'm working for Helix and Six Corporation, working about the
Great. And for everybody, because we have folks on the phone and we're not using a microphone here in the room, please speak up as loudly as you can. I know I'm super loud, but just speak up as loudly as you can. Danielle, why don't you start?
Danielle Heiberg. I'm the Advocacy Manager at Global Health Council. We're based in Washington, D.C. and represent members who work globally.
I'm Bruce Gordon. I work at the World Health Organization, global.
Hi, I'm Monica from Sumavi in the Netherlands, based in the Netherlands. We're working in 9 countries over Africa and Asia.
Great.
I'm Paul Hicks with Catholic Relief Services. I'm based in El Salvador and work primarily in Central America, but with ambitions further than that. And my focus is primarily water resources management, but I work with our country teams who do also WASH.
My name is Emma Pfister. I work for Water for People. I am the Global Marketing and Communications Manager. We work in 9 countries through Latin America, Africa, and India.
Katerina, let's go to you.
Caterina Fonseca. I'm the
Katerina.
Caterina Fonseca. I'm the head of the international program of IRC, global and 6 countries in Africa and Asia.
Perfect.
Latin America.
And that's Latin America.
It's hard to have colleagues in the room.
Never volunteered too much information.
All right, Trevor, let's go to you.
Hello, my name is Trevor Surridge. I work for the GIZ, which is German Development Corporation, and I'm here in my role as I'm the Susanna Secretary, Sustainable Sanitation Alliance Secretary.
My name is Apollos. I work with WaterAid, Regional Advocacy Manager for West Africa.
Fabrice Fotso, I'm working with UNICEF, Watch Facilities in Advocacy Global.
I'm Chris Dunstan with the Hilton Foundation. We support the programs in West Africa, Ethiopia, and India.
My name is Henry Joe. I work for ACFA Global.
Hi, my name is Andrea Jones, and I'm also with the Hilton Foundation, working with Chris in those respective countries.
Hello everyone, my name is Moyan West Italy. I work with the Sanitation and Water for All Global.
I'm Mutkam Jalata, working for Millennium Water Alliance, Singapore.
I'm Irma Erma, representing IRC. I'm a Senior WAS Advisor. We work globally, I work globally, but I have particular interest in Latin America.
My name is Evan Gill, and I work in impact investing for Catholic Relief Services. We're global, but I'm mostly working with Paula on water financing in Latin America.
Hi, I'm Ruchika. I work with IRC and I work in India.
I'm Tanvi Nagpal and I'm an introvert.
All right, guys, since you just came in, quickly, tell us who you are.
I'm Ganu from Water and Sanitation for the Urban Forum. I brought some research that only can make.
All right, Patrick.
I'm Patrick Moriarty from IRC.
I'm Clarissa Bravo-Hurst with the Sanitation Water for All Secretariat.
I'm Chris Horvath. I'm the Director of Knowledge Management and Communications for the Water System.
I'm Ariane Cartwright. I'm the Partnerships Manager for Results Canada. We're a Canadian advocacy organization, but we are part of the Results Global Network. I'm Julie Trulove. I'm a
Can't hear you at all.
Julie, really loud.
I don't have a
Okay.
This is Julie Trulove.
I'm in Washington, based in Ottawa, Canada. I'm working with Results Canada right now.
For those on the phone, she's working at Results.
Canada.
Hi everyone, I'm Hannah Whitburn. I'm the Secretary
Secretariat Director for the Global Public-Private Partnership for Handwashing.
I'm Maria Sestrielli, the Director of Networking and Partnership Development for the Water Institute.
Good afternoon, Mark Dewey, Water for People Regional Manager for Latin America.
Kelly Latham, Director of Program Quality at Water for People.
Darren Sewell, I work at Finance National USA and look after the water sanitation and health program.
And we have one, Jordan, you want to go?
Yeah, Jordan Teague, Associate Director for WASH Integration at WASH Advocacy.
And we have one more person who just came in.
Murphy.
Yeah, Murphy, can you just say who you are and who you work for?
Sure, hi, I'm Murphy McNulty and I work for the Global Quality Project.
Excellent. All right, so thanks everyone.
What about the people?
Oh, and everyone online. So why don't we, do you want to just unmute folks one at a time? Okay, Catherine, go ahead.
Oh, hello, you can hear me? Hello, Ellen?
Yes, we can.
I'm Catherine.
Yes.
Yes, I'm Catherine Wango, working for Kenya Water for Health Organization, and the region is just country Kenya.
Yeah, so Catherine works for the Kenya Water and Health Alliance. Yes, is Kenya Water and Health Organization in Kenya. Yes, great. Thanks, Catherine.
Yes.
Who's next?
Yes.
All right. Who? Alasan, if you want to unmute yourself.
Okay, hi, my name is Al Hassan. I work for End Water Poverty as the coordinator, and End Water Poverty has a membership in 50 countries, and a number of them are in the room there, while some online. I'm happy to join this conversation.
Thank you.
We also have Natalie Seguin from Freshwater Action Network Mexico, but her audio has not yet come in.
Okay, great. Anyone else online? That's it. Okay, great. So thanks everybody. We're just going to move quickly then through the rest of this so we can get into the really interesting part, which is the discussion. So why do a landscape? I went over this a little bit yesterday, but basically there was an assessment that that happened, two different assessments actually, in 2010 and 2011 at the Sunset of Water Advocates that looked at the U.S. Landscape for advocacy for WASH. And I'm going to talk a little bit about those in just a minute, but we WASH Advocates, for those I think everyone in the room should probably know, but if you don't, we are sunsetting or closing our doors at the end of this year, and so this is an opportunity to really demonstrate and highlight all of the really great work that's already going on, that has been going on basically since like the 1970s around advocacy for WASH, but to highlight some of the gaps that still exist and how we can fill them, and then also to look at how advocacy can play a role and should play a role in the SDGs now that they have been officially launched and we're trying to get to full coverage. Really looking at the role that developing country advocacy can play in this process. And then the last piece is advocacy for the future of advocacy. We want to see advocacy continue and we don't want it to go away, and so this was kind of an attempt to make sure that it doesn't. So, so that's why we pulled together the landscape. So history, I'm not going to go, all the history is in the reports, but basically since about 1977 when there was the UN Water Conference, there was that action paper that kind of designated water as a right, and so that was the beginning, I think, of advocacy for WASH, and it's been going on and strengthening ever since then. There's been some big wins, whether those be things like legislation or in individual countries, or interest from both developing and developed country governments supporting. The Sanitation and Water for All Partnership, I think, is one of the biggest wins in advocacy. And then there's a lot of other things that have kind of come along, lots of frameworks and guidelines and documents and other things that we're all using to do the advocacy work that we're doing. The current situation, I'm actually not going to go into any of that because that's what I want from today is to talk about what you're currently doing. Some of that is outlined in the landscape, but some of it's missing because I don't know what every single one of you are doing. And so I think it's really important that we, as we talk about that we'll continue to fill that information in. The gaps and opportunities, we're going to go over an entire exercise around that. And that's a part of the landscape. And then we've provided some recommendations in the landscape based on what we, kind of our 10 years of experience, what we think. And again, we welcome all criticism and ideas around those recommendations. We're just one organization with one perspective, but we've worked at some point with most of you in the room, and so we have a little bit of an idea, and we figured we'd put it on a piece of paper and send it around. So today, there's also resources in there, and we, again, welcome the resources that are out there, whether they be frameworks for how to do advocacy, but starting to think about the resources that are there and what might be gaps and resources as well. So we're going to focus clearly on the gaps and opportunities. So Jordan really quickly is going to talk about a meeting that we had in Stockholm.
Yes, but before I do, we have someone else online.
Great.
Virginia.
Virginia, go ahead.
So you need to unmute yourself.
Unmute yourself.
Right.
Just unmute.
Yeah, so we have Virginia Kamoa from the Water Supply and Sanitation Collaborative Council.
Excellent. Great.
Hello.
Virginia, there? Yeah. Can you just introduce yourself and tell us who you're working for?
All right. Hello. My name is Virginia. Sorry I'm late. The time differences, we changed time, so I didn't realize that we're starting at 6 o'clock our time. I thought it was going to be 7 o'clock. I'm Virginia. I'm a global. Yes, I'm Senior Program Officer, Global Advocacy at Water Supply and Sanitation Collaborative Council. Thank you.
Great. So just like 1 or 2 minutes of a previous meeting that we had in August, just before the Stockholm World Water Week. We gathered, it was 17 advocates for WASH from 9 different countries for a full-day meeting called Policy Innovation to Accelerate Change. It was really a peer-to-peer networking opportunity for advocates for WASH, and we had a lot of very rich and in-depth brainstorming and discussions, but a couple of the highlights that came out of that, you also got the report in the email that you should have received earlier this week. We really boiled it down to some key ingredients that are necessary to make advocates for WASH successful. The first, as will probably be no surprise to anyone, funding is really a foundational element for advocacy to happen so that it can be successful. And the participants of the meeting really said it should be written into every contract or grant that's doing a WASH project, as advocacy is a key piece for the sustainability and the government ownership of any WASH service. And it should be channeled appropriately so that the appropriate messages and the appropriate targets are getting those messages. Second, planning for advocacy. If you came to our session yesterday, you heard a lot about strategic advocacy and planning for it, and not doing it in an ad hoc or random way. And along with this comes dedicated staff to do the advocacy work rather than it being sort of an add-on piece to programmatic work. Stakeholder mapping and analysis was another key thing that came out of the meeting. Knowing who your allies are and what they are doing and what their strengths are, but also who opposes your issue and why, so that you can form the correct targets, form the correct messaging for success. And finally, communications and knowledge sharing was a big piece of that, both between countries, within countries, and also part of this is partnering with other sectors. A lot of the stuff we've been hearing this week at this conference is about integration and collaboration with health and nutrition and NTDs, and that's a key piece for advocacy as well. And also in the report, which you do have, were some key pieces for moving advocacy forward, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that theme in this meeting, but mainstreaming of advocacy was a big piece that came out of that, going along with funding and the planning of having it be part of all WASH efforts and channeled appropriately. Defining advocacy differently, so being innovative finding the different types of targets that are necessary and using different types of messages from health to economics to gender empowerment, excuse me. And finally, just being innovative with the budget advocacy as well. A lot of people think of advocacy with just either just lobbying for policy or just lobbying for budgets, and there can be a wide range of policy asks and budget asks, so being innovative in those. So read the report for more information, but just a quick highlights of this.
All right. So gaps identification and assessment activity. That means you guys at some point are going to get up and move around. Woo! Sense the excitement. Okay, so really quickly, I'm not going to read through all of these. This slide is meant to demonstrate the fact that we've made a lot of progress since the 2010 assessment. So there was an assessment by FSG and one by CARE. The one by CARE, these are kind of the perceived gaps based on all of the interviews that Brooks' team did with folks within the sector. And some of these, like, let's see, so, so there's been a lot of more coordinated efforts. We've been able to catalyze a lot of public sector funding for this, but again, some of these gaps still exist, but we have made progress in these based on the number of people who are sitting in the room right now and all of the advocacy work that's happening. So, and if anyone wants copies of these reports, I'm happy to share them with them going forward. So the FSG report indicated 3 separate things: leadership, capacity, and expertise for policy and practice advocacy. M&E addressing sustainability and effectiveness, and synthesis and communication of data to influence policy. So using that evidence for policy changes. And again, I think we've made a lot of strides in all of these efforts. So these are some based on those two, some analysis there, and based on the work that we've done over the last 10 years. These are the 8 gaps that we identified still exist. So the first one is the lack of human resources and organizational capacity. Clearly, we've made huge strides because, again, you're all in the room. But dedicated staff, you know, I think for some folks in the room, this isn't actually even part of your job description to do advocacy, and some people it's in their title. So there's definitely space for more human resources and more, as John Oldfield, since he's not here, I'll channel him, more butts in chairs doing this work. So knowledge sharing and communications. The meeting that we had in Stockholm was just one of many, and we weren't the only ones who were convening those. WSSCC, in collaboration with WASH Advocates and a number of other partners, has convened things at some of their annual meetings. WaterAid does this on a regular basis with all of their staff. So I know that this is happening, but the knowledge sharing and communications, it's not happening as often or and that information isn't being disseminated. And I think once we've tried to be as much of a driving force of that as possible, but that may be something that will be a gap after WASH Advocates is no longer around, or it may not be. We're going to find that out later today based on who's willing to step up and do some stuff. Funding for advocacy. Funding for advocacy is not easy. Advocacy, as we all know, it's difficult to demonstrate in a short period of time. Some of the small wins, it's possible to do, but it's not something that people are always interested in funding. And so really making the case and having the evidence is going to be really important going forward. I think the funding, there's been recent funding from the Dutch government to look at this going forward and to really develop national level advocacy in developing countries. There is funding that we as WASH advocates and water advocates have received from private foundations. Hilton did a really great job of funding us for a lot of years, and was really supportive of the work that we were doing. And so, you know, we are grateful that there has been set a precedent for a lot of funding for advocacy, but it's still going to be a huge gap. going forward, advocacy with donors on things like sustainability, integration, systems change, and multiple uses of data. I think that we've got some really savvy and smart donors out there, and that's awesome. But the rest of them need to come along, and they're not quite there yet. So I think it's really important. You know, we have a few folks in the room, but there's a need for two things. There's a need for external push, and there's also a need for internal push within funding institutions, within whether they be bilaterals or multilaterals, whether they be foundations or corporations. There is an interest, but how do we drive that forward around these things and create internal advocates to talk to each other. Institutionalizing and mainstreaming advocacy, Jordan touched on that quite a bit. That, you know, ingraining advocacy into the way that people are thinking about programming as opposed to making it ad hoc. And then disjointed messages. I think we've gotten better at, again, having collaborative messaging, but not all the time, and not sometimes, you know, we miss opportunities because of the lack of collaboration. And there's a lot of messages. You know, I would, if we were to go around the room and say, what is your top 2 things that you would be advocating for in this room, we would have 150 things, right? So trying to figure out how do you find the allies that you can work with who have collaborative messaging so that you have a united front when you're going to decision makers to try to make that change. So lack of strong grassroots movements. I don't think as the WASH sector there's been small pockets of grassroots movements, but if you look at the WASH sector in comparison to HIV, in comparison to let's say breast cancer awareness in the US, I mean, we're not even close in the grassroots realm, and there is an opportunity there. I think small organizations are doing bits and pieces, but there's never been a massive coordinated effort around grassroots advocacy, and so there's a real opportunity for that. And then the last one is coordinating mechanisms. Coordinating mechanisms are not always coordinating. So what do I mean? Yesterday I talked a little bit about this, that basically there are coordinating mechanisms that are happening, let's say, at the national level. So in Kenya is a great example. There's Kawasana, and there is Kenya WASH Alliance, and there is, I don't even know them all, but, and Kenya's not the only one. The same thing is happening. Zambia has 3 or 4 of them that are, everyone who believes that they are the coordinating mechanism for the civil society voices in that country. But none of them play nicely together in most circumstances. There are exceptions to that, but that's a challenge. And so trying to get those coordinating mechanisms to talk to each other, so again, there's a united voice that even if they have different objectives and they're coming at it from different angles, that they're not conflicting when it comes to messaging and other things to decision makers. So those are the 8 that we came up with. Big question for you guys. Woohoo! Moving on. Are we on the right track? Did we do? What are we missing? Are these the right ones? And so now I'm turning it over to all of you guys. What's going? You know, is this right? Are we missing huge things? John,
can you put it back up before John?
Yeah.
That was what I was going to ask.
That's what he was going to ask.
I say, please put that back up.
So John, I'm just going to choose. Yeah. So John Sparks, why don't you start, and then we'll go from there.
So this is where we talk at or against any of those points, right?
Yeah, no,
the missing ones.
Please, so I will not be hurt in any way, nor will any of my colleagues, if you're like, this list here is a big load of crap. That's fine. I hope that it's not. We have 10 years that says that maybe some of these things are true.
Okay, so
but
number 7.
Please be honest. I mean, yeah, go ahead.
So, well, all of us could comment, obviously, and probably will on every one of the 8, but I'm just simply saying that in number 7, for some time, I mean, I've worked on other issue areas for many years, and this is the weakest, and you alluded to this, of the grassroots in terms, at least in the U.S. context. I don't know if that's true in that many of the European countries, and then in the developing nations themselves, it's really hard to say. We don't know. I don't think anybody knows that. But in looking at it from the U.S. point of view, I am increasingly skeptical that a lot of effort in developing grassroots is really a big priority. I think it's good to be opportunistic. I think it's good to look for those opportunities, and sometimes around events or news developments, and it's something as grim as Ebola, when the Americans went batshit, where they thought they were all going to have Ebola. And they were told that by a certain political party that was going to happen. So things like that, we can cash in on that for our purposes, to be honest. But I do think that grassroots is something that is hard for this sector because the NGOs individually are so jealous of their own supporters, their own donors, and everything is tied to, you like what we're doing, give us money, don't give it to somebody else. So I think that's always going to be a bit of an impediment to any kind of real significant collective action on grassroots. And by roots, we mean ordinary humans. Grass tops types, on the other hand, are where a lot of our success has really come from. Engaging influential people is still something that as a sector we need to work more closely on.
Great, thanks. Clarissa, you had your hand up? So
yes.
Go ahead.
So I don't know if it's implicit in some of these, but I think one of the kind of missing glaring gaps to me is that sometimes when we do advocacy, we don't know what the right thing to advocate for is. And I think about this in particular in the success that Sanitation Water for All has had in convening finance ministers. We really wanted to have an impact on finance ministers. We felt that they weren't enough aware of the importance of the water and sanitation sector, and they weren't doing enough to try to make investments. But then when they ask us questions like, where should I put money in order to get the biggest bang for the buck? Rural sanitation, urban sanitation, high tech, low tech, subsidies, no subsidies. We often either fall short because we say we just don't know, or else we all say different things, and there's no sort of accepted best practice. And I think that that's a real problem because it either means that we don't do advocacy well, or we're actually telling people the wrong thing, which is a bad kind of advocacy. You know, one we should probably avoid.
Okay, great. Darren?
So building a little bit on that point, I guess one of my questions to this group is, you know, can we be in a perpetual state of advocacy? Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Do we need to wax and wane with energy and opportunity? And when we're waning, should we be pre-positioning responses of the kind that Clarissa was talking about? So that's the first point. The second point is, I think we assume that there's a linear connection between getting your evidence base correct and actually using a change in behaviour that you want from a policymaker at the national level. And I think we probably need to examine and interrogate that. For instance, I think one of the things that is reflected here is who's the right intermediary to get to a grass top. And I think we're learning that we need better entrees into high-level officials in order to have a bigger bang for our buck when it comes to advocacy. So I think the second thing is about who are the right targets.
Lisa. For anybody who was in the advocacy session yesterday, this may be a bit redundant with some points that I was making in my presentation, but you know, I'm really struck by how insular the WASH advocacy community is, even just in this room at the surface. There are very few organizations here who do not specialize in water or WASH in one way or another. And it is a limitation, and you know, one could argue that that's linked to sort of number 1 and number 3 there, but there's also, and Darren, this, you know, this may be linked to the point around grass. It's not an issue that a lot of multi-mandate organizations take up. It's even organizations that do a lot of WASH service delivery very rarely do WASH advocacy, and so we tend to be talking to ourselves a lot. And so there's something missing about how this becomes a priority issue for those of us who, those people who don't come to a WASH and Health conference or who don't go to Stockholm or come to our WASH working group or whatever. And there may be some grass tops components to that, and really expanding the entry points that we look for people who are talking about the issue, thinking a bit more broadly about both the targets and the message bearers.
because we can have this conversation with ourselves all day long, but it's not that different than a conversation we had 2 years ago if the makeup of the people in the room never changes.
Great. I'm going to go Bruce, and then Tanvi, and then Apollos. Well, I promised everyone will have a turn. Get there. Yeah.
So, yeah, when I look at the list, and one thing that seems a bit, well, it's a bit interesting is that it's almost like this vertical side advocacy seems to, you know, kind of be self-contained. And I think this whole WASH business is, you know, that there's many groups and many interests, as you said. And I think, so I wonder if one of the questions that we need to talk about is tactics, because we're all advocates, you know, in our own little domains. And I'm finding, certainly for our organization, you know, we're way behind on the tactics. And so Clarissa brings up sanitation, water for all. And suddenly, you know, WaterAid's helping us, you know, with the media and making sure that we're capitalizing on this event and getting our messages in. And, you know, so I feel like there's a lot of synergies that we can bring about by sort of getting an advocacy hat on all of us, people that are doing our technical work or whatever work, but, you know, we need to stay on top of the tactics on it. So, I mean, it cuts across a lot of the things.
Thanks. All right, Tanvi.
So I think I'm going to
talk very loudly.
I'll build up on both Darren as well as Bruce's point. And the issue is that advocacy is taking place. You're advocating to a certain group of people at all times, whether it's the top, the middle, the very bottom, to people. You can be advocating to communities to advocate to higher levels of people. So the issue is there's all forms of advocacy taking place, and yes, Darren, it takes place all the time, but it's not always distinguished as advocacy. Sometimes it's lobbying, sometimes it's demand. It is taking place, whether we're doing it or other people are doing it. So the other issue to remember is that yes, it's always taking place, and two, it's taking place to sometimes the same people, those same ministers of finance, by not just the WASH community, but by the housing community and the education and the disaster reduction, and all of those guys are all advocating for the same pool of money. So understanding what other people are advocating for and understanding your tactics becomes really important, because advocacy happens all the time and it happens often to the same people.
Yeah, I think one thing that sort of comes across to me is around a strategy and the context. We seem to have very rigid strategies because we're clear that in the next 5 years this is what we're going to do. We've tied it to certain funding, it's clear, and because of that, we seem not to be too aware of the changing context, especially in a lot of the countries where we work. And that's impacting. And linked to that is the fact that we've done our strategies because we want to see to it that, you know, we can sort of own the results, you know, and we probably don't care what some other person is doing or what others are doing, because we just want to pursue our thing and get our results, own it, tick the box, get the donors saying, here it is, you know. So it's about understanding that the context does change, and sometimes overnight, you know, and how we respond is critical, and how we think about how we do flexible strategies that can be adapted and respond quickly, not in a reactionary matter, but but in a more proactive, you know, so that we're able to do things right, or rather, do things better and do better things.
Great. We're going to hold for folks in the room for 1 second, and who's in Virginia, if you want to unmute yourself, and go ahead.
Thank you very much. My comment is related to linking advocacy at different levels, because I find that sometimes you find that there's good advocacy maybe happening at the global level, and maybe commitments are made at that level. But in terms of how that is followed up, going to the regional, national, and other levels, sometimes there's a disjoint. So looking at how best are we going to follow up on commitments made at certain levels, especially when we go down to the national and maybe grassroots level, because some commitments might not be met because they're not properly followed up. So I think linking up our advocacy is good, but also looking at issues of linking with people from outside the sector, because if you look at the SDGs, achievement of some priorities in the watch sector are also dependent on achievement of other targets from across the goals. So how do we link up with other sectors, and which sectors would be priorities to link up with, I think is something that is very important.
Great, thank you, Virginia. We have one other person on the phone. Alasan, can you unmute yourself and go ahead?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, brilliant. So, very good in terms of analysis. But what I found problematic is the institutionalization, mainstreaming advocacy at national, subnational level in developing countries, and as well as coordinating mechanisms are not coordinating. So when I was reading through this document that you sent earlier on the scan, what was missing for me was that there was no scan on the groups that worked on water policy or sanitation policy reforms. And to be specific, a lot of the global justice water movement, their issues have not been tackled, and they've not even been mentioned in this document as part of the movement. So what we've been describing in this document and this conversation as the movement is the movement that we know and we work with, but not the movement that exists in other space. So probably if we're going to move forward in terms of globally having a unified voice in the WASH arena, then we have to reach out to other groups who are not in our networks, but who are also doing a lot of work in country to change national policies. And I find it very worrying that they are missing in this discussion and the documents as well.
Great, thank you so much. Go ahead.
Thank you. So just to quickly contribute to maybe to start with the point that Hassan was mentioning, which is related to point number 8, coordinating mechanisms and not coordinating. And I'm drawing some of my contribution from 4 years of work in West Africa with several coalitions. Mm-hmm. And I think part of the problem here is that you would expect sort of these coalitions or an agenda to kind of get to a point where there's a challenge, because your leadership challenge could be a lack of focus in terms of what's next to deal with, could be strategic thinking in terms of what's the next big thing that we have to deal with. So the problem may not be so much that there are too many players, but the fact that there is no ability to recreate and understand that now this is the point where we have to recreate, to develop new consensus and get to move into a new direction. That to me is where I kind of felt part of the bigger challenge, having worked on the ground with some of the coalitions. Working with the Sanitation and Water for All partnership now, we work on these high-level commitments that are made at the high-level meeting. And one of the things that we try to do after the commitments are made is to try and drum up some multi-stakeholder advocacy at country level on some of those commitments. Some of the difficulties are that commitments are made by the government, and then to advocate on those, you need to work with the technocrats at least. And in some cases, you find difficulties where the technocrats don't really understand how they can jointly work with, say, civil society. So perhaps unblocking some of those difficulties would be keeping and ensuring that the government people understand what the role of advocacy might be in some cases. It's not in every country, but just in some cases where they would really have a very very biased view of what advocacy would do once they get the term advocacy and the thinking around it sort of changes. That for me is one thing that I would sort of try and understand.
Great, Patrick.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's inherent there in some of the other comments, but I mean, just looking at your point number 1, and I think also probably point number 6.
Can I make some comment? Hello?
Yeah, Catherine, hold on 1 second. Catherine, hold on 1 second. Patrick's going to go, and then we'll go to you on the phone, okay? Hold on 1 second.
Yes, I think between point 1 and point 6, I'm not sure that there's a huge lack of organizational capacity. I think that a lot of the organizational capacity is being put into the wrong directions, because actually if I look at lots of people sitting around here, you all have amazing fundraising and sales teams, and often those fundraising and sales teams are putting out messages that are diametrically opposed to what your programming and policy people are saying. And I'm thinking particularly, you know, around the long battle around sustainability. If I had $100,000 for every organization that's said, yeah, we'd really like to get on board with the sustainability agenda, but we're having some problem with our sales folks because they say it's too complicated for our funders and we've got to keep putting up the smiling kids, I wouldn't have to be putting so much money into fundraising either. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of skills there.
Okay, Catherine, we'll go to you on the phone, and then Paul.
Thank you.
Can I say something?
Yes, go ahead.
Hello. Yes, what I wanted to contribute towards this discussion is that I feel in terms of advocacy, we need a pool of individuals apart from organizations who really have the skills on how to advocate for in a particular issue. Because, for example, in Kenya, you find that when we have to advocate on a particular subject matter, then they look around who has the skills to do that. And it looks there are very few individuals in the country that can do that, or organizations. Then the second point is that advocacy looks to fit well more in networks and sort of coalitions, because the advocacy at one time in developing countries is seen by governments as if you are an opposing force. But if you are in a group, then it has been more accepted as coalitions or networks more than individual organizations or individuals. So really, capacity building networks and individuals on advocacy skills is very critical in moving forward the whole issue of advocacy for in the wash sector, for example.
Great, thank you so much, Catherine. Paul, why don't you go ahead?
So I'm kind of new and an outsider to the advocacy world, and I found it interesting the way that we're framing this as sort of advocating for advocacy. And so the question is, what are we advocating for? And to me, I think it's swallowing truly a little bit of the agenda for change, and that the SDG really changes the framework about what we're doing, and sort of what we've been advocating for so many years has now been kind of set up and agreed to in the SDGs. So then it changes our role now. And what I'm thinking just from our organization, CRS, and where we're working is, there needs to be a new problem analysis in the countries that we're working in on what are the constraints of achieving the SDGs. And we do that not for the countries and present it to them, but do it, who are the people that need to be influenced, and get them involved in the problem analysis. And then we'll know specifically what we need to advocate for within the different countries, or or even at municipal or departmental levels, about the specific advocacy points. But that, for me, that's kind of glaring. Is what is it? I think that's where the work has to go before we start the meta-analysis of what's happening in the advocacy. And I think if we were clear on what we're advocating for, then some of those things would fall into place. And then just a last point on that, on the coordinating, the coordinators aren't coordinating. And we've been struggling with that, but I think one of them is what John's saying, is that we're guilty of sort of, we have our own agenda as institutions, but then so do the local institutions on the ground. And sort of now, like for me, it's come to respect that there are differences there, and some of those advocacy groups splintered from each other, and bringing them together is sort of against their whole nature, because that they splintered. And so respecting that and understanding it and looking where there might be differences, but trying to get them to agree is like getting CRS and World Vision to agree.
Okay. So hold on one second, really quickly. Go ahead.
Okay, I have to leave, so I'm very apologetic because I'm sort of jumping the queue, but I'm presenting another session. I just thought it might be useful if I outlined a suggested this, and it seems like a good idea if I outlined what's coming down the pipe with sanitation water for all over the next couple of years. And Sitali is also here and can give more details if you need it. But there's a few places where there's going to be some real key sort of windows of opportunity for an advocacy, sort of surge within countries and also within donors. So the cycle that Sanitation and Water for All has had in the past, which many of you are familiar with, is that every 2 years there's a high-level meeting of finance ministers and ministers of development cooperation in Washington, and piggybacked onto that is a meeting of sector ministers. And we've done that 3 times over the last 6 years, and they've been great opportunities to get finance ministers paying more attention to water and sanitation, but also to be able to advocate to sector ministers, water ministers, health ministers, what best practice in the sector is. And many of you that work at country level have been very helpful in getting countries ready, supporting them through the preparatory process of bringing commitments to those meetings. In the light of the SDGs, we're now going to slightly change the cycle. So for the first time, starting in March of next year, we're going to do a big standalone sector ministers meeting. It'll probably be held in Africa. It will reflect the growing membership of Sanitation Water for All. The partnership is expanding to bring in middle-income countries as well as low-income countries. And it'll be an opportunity to get sector ministers for a longer period of time, maybe 2 or 3 days, to talk to them about what does the ambition of the SDG agenda mean for them. What kinds of things are going to be monitored? Why is it different from the SDGs? Why it's going to take so much more of a push? And of course, we're going to be talking very much about how they use their own domestic financing, as well as how they use aid flows. Very much in the sort of the spirit of the type of thing that Dominic was talking about in his keynote address. How do you use whatever aid money is available in some sort of catalytic way? And then, because of that meeting in March, we will push the high-level meeting to October. Instead of being held at the spring meetings of the World Bank, it'll be held at the fall meetings of the World Bank in October. And it'll be a meeting of finance ministers very much focused on issues of financing and investment. And then the cycle after that will continue with the 2 meetings split. Instead of having the 2 meetings, sector ministers meetings and the high-level meeting with finance ministers together, they from now on will be in alternate years. And we're really looking to build on the experience of convening sector ministers meetings as a great way to be able to advocate for them for the kind of best practice and get them to talk to each other if they want to talk to each other. So it's going to be a bit of a different cycle, but it also offers a lot more opportunity. The last thing I'll mention is that we want to get away from what we've done in the past, which is to have countries come with a kind of grab bag of commitments. And many of you have worked on the commitments, and they can kind of be all over the place, a bit apples and oranges. And instead, we're going to encourage countries to come up with a sustainable development plan for WASH, a strategy of how they're going to ramp up, how they're going to do things differently in order to meet the sustainable development goals, perhaps with some kind of 2-yearly set of milestones that can then be tracked and monitored. And they'll be very much based on the collaborative behaviors that have also been talked about during this conference, our mutual behaviors between development partners and countries themselves about how to make best use of resources and to work together, particularly emphasis on the system strengthening agenda. So I wanted you to know that, because then many of you, I think, will be contributing to the work, the preparatory work for that, work around that. And on that note, then I'm going to leave.
All right. Thanks, Clarissa.
Thank you. Very sorry.
All right, Fabrice.
Oh no, you're
next.
next.
Just to give you a heads up, we're going to spend probably another 5, maybe 10 minutes, depending on how many people have things they want to say, doing this piece of it, the critique of the 8 that are up there. And then based on those 8, knowing that they're not perfect, we're going to move on to the next activity, which is trying to think through if and how we should be filling any of those gaps. So. All right, Fabrice, go ahead.
Just quickly and building on what everybody said, what is missing probably is that there's mainly from what I can bring you to the advocacy domain, there's many networks already existing within the sector. The idea is more, first of all, to advocate what different goal or different outcome. I think the challenge is definitely also to look credibility because each organization has a comparative advantage. And therefore, being able to really realize that we can have many perspectives, many people that we want to get, but it's important also to be able to give who is more credible for this specific message. Who I think having many people, like you say, many platforms should not be necessarily a problem. It's a bit how each of them build on their own comparative advantage and develop a credibility to avoid, because the competition, compete with any other people who may say need to be put in perspective. Many network, not a problem, but each of those networks they build credibility for the message that we want to say.
Great. Whoever, everyone on the phone, can you just make sure you guys mute yourselves, or online, can you just mute yourself if you're not talking, because we can hear you. So Hope, and then Jane and John. Oh, and then Guy. Sorry.
I'm really glad to hear many people reinforce this point about intersectoral collaboration. I guess I just really want to make a plea from the health sector. I think I'm like the token health person in the room.
Yeah, another one.
Here, excellent.
Trying to fill this back up.
I think
Theoretically.
I think in the past, I think Lisa, you used the word insular to describe the WASH advocacy community, and I think that's been a gap and a remaining or a challenge, I guess, and a remaining opportunity. And I think, and I understand that there's perhaps been some fear that the WASH and the importance of WASH would get lost in broader health agendas or messages. So I guess I just wanted to say from the health sector writ large, like, you're definitely preaching to the choir. I feel like any legislation I look at where WASH is not represented, I'm a strong voice. I think that there are still opportunities for the WASH sector to show up in those maternal and child health conversations. And I think it's a very practical and strategic place to go, considering that there is limited capacity, limited human resources. I think it's a great way to tap into other warm bodies at your disposal and other connections to make. So just really want to make a plea for that. Great to you.
I just want to make a few points.
Go ahead, Jane. I'm ready.
And I'll start with what my friend from SWA said. I think we make conclusions based on a number of things. If you say that probably the people that we're trying to do advocacy with or on or do not understand, then you're starting from the wrong side. These are government people. These are their policies. This is their space. You get in there, you want to change, you want to improve. It's on their terms. And you need to understand those terms. In my culture, we have a saying, if you come to my house and I give you a mat to sit on, and then you ask for a chair, then you're sort of getting into a sphere that is not yours, unless you become an in-look, literally translated. So they understand. They know what we want to do, they know what we want to change, but they are government, and we need to appreciate that. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult. I've been in the world of advocacy. I've been thrown out of parliamentary committees. I've been tear-gassed. So I know what I'm talking about. If you say they don't understand, you're starting from a very wrong side. And then secondly, we get in and we have our own linear way of doing things. You have an advocacy strategy, an advocacy plan, tactics. Whose are those things for? You have your tactics, fine. So I'm government. So I think we need to be more flexible. Don't get in with linear things, like straight line kind of things. Look at what changes. As I think the colleague in the room said, things change overnight in some of our countries. You're prepared to do something tomorrow, then tomorrow something else comes up. So we need to be flexible with that and also understand the situations they work in. And as I said, this is their space. We are getting into that space and we want to change a few things. And then lastly, in Uganda, I come from Uganda, I'm Jane, I work with IRC. After the approval of the SDGs, government of Uganda, Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Foreign Affairs have already organized 2 meetings 2 meetings already to start developing a strategy on how to implement SDGs. So some of these governments are already on top of things. They're already running. So it's up to us now to start either running after them and overtaking them and that kind of thing. But they are already moving. And so if we say, oh, we'll wait, I think I had Clarissa saying in October, and we'll support them to develop strategies. My country is already developing strategies. They are moving from Addis to approval of the SDGs. Strategies are being laid, drafts are being debated in all the sectors. So some of these governments are not just seated. They are doing something, and we need to know and appreciate that that is what is happening, how we get in there, what value addition we are putting in, and whom we are dealing with. One morning there's a time we're working with the commissioner for a long time. Then things changed very drastically. The commissioner became a director within a week. And so we had to start with the new commissioner who had no idea what we were talking about. So you go back to square A and you appreciate that you're going back. So you don't push this new guy. We had moved with X. They don't work like that. X has gone. So talk to me. Don't refer to X, And we make some of those mistakes and we find ourselves in a very funny situation, and then we start saying, advocacy is very hard. These people, they don't listen. Why? So I guess what I'll share.
Yeah, great. Okay, so hold on one second. So John and then Guy.
Thanks. I really agree with what you said. I think that's appreciated by a lot of people here about the necessity to be flexible, which I think we've all tried to be. 2 things real quick. Fabrice, I think what you were saying, I really think that's important, as we're bringing all these local networks, do the things that they do, because people do have special competencies, and we sometimes in our global thinking, supposedly, we forget how that should work and how that should inform our own decision making on what we use as tactics. And I want to go back, before I end my comment, I just want to go back to what Patrick was saying earlier. Yes, Patrick, you. 1 through 6, you're right. I think you said 1 through 6. I think that capacity to a great deal is there, and this isn't a condemnation. This is, I think, an acknowledgement of human reality, organizational imperative. 10 years from now, any group sitting here will say the same thing on 1 through 6. We will still have those issues, so that's fine. That doesn't mean we haven't made progress in the intervening 10 years in a lot of very serious on-the-ground ways. But I think I think it's true. I think there are people who do have messaging for their own marketing/sales reasons at cross purposes, and I don't know quite how to get at that. And I represent an organization that's supposedly, in theory, set up to help resolve some of those intra-NGO differences. Gee, why is that so hard to do? But at the same time, I don't think we need to make a fetish of people having the same message or working on the same messages across the world. I think that the liberal mind always wants to have everything organized, and I don't think it necessarily has to be that way. As long as we are making progress, and it's always going to be episodic, it's always going to be spasmodic. There are going to be spasms of progress and longer periods of no progress. I think that's something that's one you have to accept, but it's not a resignation to not more coordination and more clear thinking and getting on the case of some occasional really bad actors out there. I don't think our desire to not be oppressive or not be elitist or whatever, if we think we know something, I think as a shall we say, a culture or a group of people who are working in this area, we shouldn't be afraid to call out some organizations at certain times for truly bad behavior, I think. I represent a bunch of organizations, so I can't do it. So somebody else.
Do you have a reaction to that specifically, or okay? So
it's good.
So yeah, Guy, go ahead.
Very quickly, I think what I'm saying is perhaps in line with what Brian is saying. So this idea of differential messaging, clearly, it makes sense to all of us if we're interested in doing advocacy, say in Kenya. When I say we, I mean international organisations represented in this room and local organisations in Kenya. Clearly, it makes sense somehow to bring that together under an integrated platform, perhaps even under an integrated ban, but I don't want us to underestimate the challenges of that, because when we're talking about a high-level aim, like, for example, 0.5% 5% of GDP to sanitation, it's easy for all of us to agree on that. But when we start doing things like Clarissa has suggested, which is not here to defend herself, and mapping out the detail of who to do that, we're not going to agree. Different organisations are not going to agree. There's going to be people in this room who feel that rural CLTS is critical. There are going to be people who feel that urban sewerage is critical. So I think whatever we do to achieve that end needs to allow that flexibility that I think Brian has alluded to.
Great. John.
John.
Sorry.
That's all right. We only have drinks one night. Don't worry about it.
Come on.
The guy in the purple t-shirt.
Yeah.
I just wanted to sort of maybe clarify one thing, and taking a word that was used in here about sort of the perception from non-government when they hear the term advocacy and how they view that. I mean, I don't think it's a contested ground that some of that perception may be negative. Now, in some cases, I think Tammy yesterday used the term protest or movement, which is not exactly the advocacy term, but some people view the same more or less, view the two terms more or less as the same. So I was not implying that this is happening everywhere. I was saying, in some cases, when we talk to some of the government colleagues, when we're asking about the commitments that they've taken, and whether there's chance that they could work with some civil society institutions to actually just share. So we make this commitment on financing. I'm in the Ministry of Water. I'm having difficulties. This commitment on financing is not moving forward, but you and the civil society could possibly take a move on this. Some of them have got difficulties understanding how they can work around that because they say some of the civil society people, they'll come back and use this information against me and it might jeopardize my job. Now, I mean, everybody here understands that, but that's the point I was trying to make. Not to say that, I mean, go back and tell governments, just not to undermine what people understand, but I hope by adding this information, it has added some clarity to the point.
Yeah, I mean, on that point, a lot of organizations are creating things like influencing strategies instead of creating advocacy strategies, because advocacy is not a word that means something positive in a lot of places. In the U.S., even advocacy is associated a lot of times with lobbying, and people don't necessarily want to hear that. So, totally point taken. Bruce, and then we're gonna take a. Yep, Evan. Oh, sorry,
No.
and. Bruce.
So, yeah, I guess probably just a bit of a reinforcement of what has been said already, but it's returning to something Catherine Wango said on the phone, and we talked a little bit about Kenya. But, you know, she was saying, you know, this idea that we need to do this in a sort of in a coordinated, not coordinated isn't the right word, but maybe in a bit of a partnership type way. We've had a lot of experiences with Kenya working together with NGOs, and I think that relationship with the government is very positive, and Catherine can tell you a lot about that. I was just talking to Kefal Mbacho before coming in, and he is very excited about this. I think he's on the panel tonight. He wants to know about the opportunities for health and water and SDGs and how that might influence policy. And then we get into Patrick's thing about systems building, and we start talking about that. And I think in some odd way that's how advocacy works, right? It works on a little bit of trust, and it takes a while to get relationships, and maybe the person you're talking to, and I don't want to, you know, WHO is a small player in all this, but the government does see them as a technical partner, and so it, you know, it's so just working. You know, you don't necessarily have to be talking to the person in government, but you know, ultimately someone will talk to that person, and you seize the opportunities. And I think this is the right time. This SDGs, we need to shape them. They could come out in many different ways.
Thank you. Kara?
So I guess coming from the perspective of having different people in the room, I'm definitely someone who's very different. I work in investment, and I work across sectors. And you know, I think when I'm going to other conferences and I'm seeing other groups that advocate in this sort of innovative financing for development space, I don't see wash and water show up as much. I've seen whole tracks, whole conference themes on fisheries, like just, and this is in a across all sectors. It'll be health, and you know, it'll be agriculture, and then it'll be fisheries, right? So somebody has figured out how to advocate for fisheries across this particular group, and really get people moving. And so I'd say, you know, it'd be great to have a bit of a broadening, you know, just from maybe traditional donors owners and government to look at sort of a bit of a shifting landscape into more of an innovative finance group, different parts of multilaterals and how they're going to start working with financing, and then how some of the approaches are changing on the ground in terms of incorporating business and private sector and what that means for how you want to advocate, what you want to advocate for, and to whom. Great.
Just very quickly,
so restart.
something. UNICEF is organizing a watch innovative financing event in Napa. Just
Reese, you can send me information. I'll circulate it to the group.
Right. So in Canada, you know, we have a really strategic opportunity with the new government, who like Trudeau has expressed interest in water sanitation, and so it should be really exciting for the next 4 years of their mandate. But I think at results, we keep coming back to the same question of we're dealing with a fixed pot of money. And if we don't talk about increasing the aid envelope in ODA, then we end up sort of fighting amongst ourselves. And you know, the Global Fund replenishment is coming up in about 6 months. Then it's going to be Gavi again. Then it's going to be the GPE, and it just so I think that's something that I would love to hear more about in terms of whether you're looking at linking in with the GPP's left, but larger ODA increase strategies, like what was successful in the UK.
All right, really quickly.
Sorry, can I just jump?
Hold on, we can talk about Trudeau later.
No, it wasn't Trudeau. Although I'm happy he's photogenic. It's just to say on it. Let me just. This idea that, like, how does advocacy work? You're talking about intersectoral stuff, and I know Canada cares a lot about this maternal child health strategy, right? And well, maybe Trudeau will as well. And but that is an opportunity to, you know, so it's I think we need to work all these different angles. Right?
I noticed that a couple of folks have joined us, so I just really want to quickly allow for them to do some basic introductions. So we're going to start with Erica.
Hi everyone, my name is Erica Quinn. I am the WASH manager at Rotary International. I see a relevant role for Rotary.
Helen.
Hi everyone, my name is Robin Fisher. I work for WaterAid in the Washington DC office focused on policy and advocacy.
Ryan. You have to be loud because there's some folks on the phone.
Ryan Schweitzer from Advocacy.
Great. Hello.
My name is Lil Sosa, and I work for Avena Foundation, which is a Latin American foundation.
Great. Jordan.
We also have Maria Gima from Advocacy in Mozambique.
Awesome.
And
welcome, Maria.
Andrea Guzman from
WSSCC. Great. Thanks, Andrea and Maria for joining. Glad you guys are there.
For having us.
I know it's late for both of you. So Trevor, and then we'll go this direction, or go across. Henry, you're next.
Right, just 2 points, one with each of my caps on. So first point with my Susanna Secretary cap on. The last point goes that coordinating mechanisms are not coordinating. To try and have platforms that are out there where you have a secretariat function that remains neutral and is able to talk to very many different actors, but obviously has their funding from somewhere as well. That should, don't think anyone will underestimate it, but it's extremely difficult to do. And really, I think there should be perhaps more such secretariat kind of functions on these coordination platforms, and maybe because I feel their core role is to join the dots, to get actors talking together that should be talking together, and that's extremely challenging to do because you have to obviously always be neutral or try to. So that's why I'm very careful with which cap I'm wearing. So that was my Susanna Secretariat cap. I want also putting on my GIZ cap. So now talking from a German Development Corporation perspective, I just want to echo what Jane said, maybe add on a few different words to what Jane was saying from Uganda. I think everyone who wants to work in advocacy really needs to take the time to understand the governments that they are advocating to. And I feel
in my limited experience in the sector, that sometimes that time to understand the governments and what their plans are and what they want to do in the sector before advocating to them isn't always, that time investment is not as big as it should be. Because otherwise you very quickly offend the government, and at the end of the day, they are the ones that are mandated to provide what we all advocate.
Great, thanks, Henry.
I just want to make a very quick point. So we don't work just in WASH, we work across sectors as well, in technology. And I think going back to kind of this is one pot of money, how do we kind of talk about the trade-offs? Within this, there's always trade-offs that, yes, we're going to direct more resources to WASH, but it's taking it from educational. Kind of, these are serious trade-offs. It's not easy decisions. So how do we kind of work with people we're talking to about this in terms of kind of discussing those trade-offs and having kind of a rational discussion based off information that makes sense. So we're not kind of guessing where we should add resources.
Great. Okay. Since I don't see any hands right at the moment, which is awesome, I want to, since we've been sitting for a bit, I want to give you the opportunity to stand and stretch. I am not giving you the opportunity for a coffee break, but if you do need coffee, you can nonchalantly, as we will, our next activity will be moving around, that you sneak out, go get some coffee, and come back. Okay? For those that need it.
Nonchalantly.
Yeah, and if you bring food, just bring for everybody. Come on, people. And sorry we can't provide coffee and treats to those that are on the phone. Okay, so we're going to move. So I really appreciate all of the feedback on these. And when we send around the Word version of the document, I really hope that you'll continue to provide comments and maybe some edits or other recommendations for how we can make the gaps a little bit clearer and making sure that there's something that we should, either remove or just identify and explain. What I didn't do, which is in the document, is there are explanations and some examples that go with each of these. But I think based on this, we'll be doing some adjustments to that. So thank you for that. Now, based on what we have up here right now, knowing that they're not perfect and maybe we would need to make some adjustments to them, we've got some things. So this is an interactive activity for everybody to, so we've got multiple colors, and so you'll kind of take some down and pass it around kind of thing. And for those that are on the phone, I'll explain in a second how you guys are going to do this. So pink. Pink represents current activities that you are, as an organization, are already doing, advocacy activities, not not traditional WASH programming, but advocacy type of work, whether it's formal or informal, that is already filling some of these gaps or addresses some of these gaps, okay? Orange. Orange is things that are in the pipeline for 2016, all right? So things that you already know are coming around, I'm going to use WASH It as an example of that, that also may have the opportunity to fill these gaps. So you can write as much or as little as you want on here, just write the words, the letters of WASH It, that's fine, but you'll have to explain that. But anyway, so pink what you're currently doing, orange is what's in the pipeline. Now, there are two other colors. These, it doesn't matter that they're separate colors, but the green and the yellow, these are things that you think could be possible. Maybe you're not the one that's going to be doing them. It has nothing to do with your organization, but these are the ideas that you have on how the gap should be filled. So you could write an independent WASH advocacy organization. No, I'm just kidding. No, but I mean, these are sorry, small jokes, folks, small jokes. No, but these are things that you think could be opportunities. It could be, webinar, I don't know. Pick, throw advocacy messages from an airplane. I don't know. Whatever you can come up with is great, but that's what the green and the yellow are for. So take a couple of these, write on them. We've got lots of markers. So you're going to do that activity now. I'm going to give you about 15 minutes or so, and take the sticky off and stick it in the correct place. Yes, guys.
To identify our organizations?
Yes, please. So on here, just if you've got a really long name, so please write what's up on there or something like that. If you want to write out the whole thing, feel free. Or if you instead would just like to write your name next to it, then we will identify who that is. So great. So you guys are going to have 15 minutes to do that. Before we break, let me just give instructions to folks on the phone. So anyone on the phone, if you have specific things that you're doing, just type into the chat box for Jordan, and we will write them on sticky notes and stick them around the room for you. So again, just let us know what gap you think that it's filling and what category it falls into, current work, what's in the pipeline, or a big idea, or a little idea, either way. So please take the next 15 minutes or so. If that means that you go and grab a cup of coffee and then you come back and do it, or vice versa, that's fine. But if I catch any of you just having conversations in the coffee area, you're in really big trouble. So grab some of the sticky notes here and please start writing. What I would like to ask is for a couple of volunteers. So who wants to volunteer? Someone who is very loud.
Not me.
John's barks are actually very loud. So you just nominated yourself. Shouldn't have spoke up, John. Shouldn't have spoke up. Okay, so John, if you can start over with the human resources and organizational capacity, and what I want you to do, you don't have to read them all. What I'd like you to do is just pick a couple of the pink and a couple of the orange and read us the organization and read us the item that they wrote down. So, and if for those of you on the phone, if you can't hear, I will repeat them to you.
Oh, they're all so good.
Just pick some.
I like small benchmarks, so let's see.
Okay, so we start with the pink ones, please, if you can.
Oh, sorry.
Start with one or two pink.
Okay.
Okay.
And this is anonymous.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Is that with a Susanna hat or GIZ hat?
Is that your GZ or is this Susanna?
Susanna.
Okay.
It's a Susanna.
This is from Susanna.
Great.
It says co-creating solutions with local NGOs, local government, local WASH networks.
Great. We'll ask you more about that.
Okay.
Great.
Future?
Future. Something happening in 2016 or beyond.
Back to the future. Capacity building for advocacy in 6 countries, WASH with integrated water resources management. And at the corner it says Somali, IRC, ACPO.
It is a little joint effort there, which Patrick will be happy to pass around some information about.
Okay.
Perfect. Thanks. You stick them back on. Yeah, you're done for now for those. I'm going to pull one more that I think is interesting. One of them talks about supporting networks in developing countries. So it says support FANSA, which is Freshwater Action Network South Asia, to conduct a survey on WASH in schools and submit the results to SACOSAN. So it's talking about their process of, it kind of falls in both knowledge sharing and communication, as well as human resource and organizational capacity, because through this process, ideally FANSA would have some increased capacity on how to do the surveys themselves, and they may already have some of those skills, so it's just a matter of identifying those things. So really interesting. I need someone else with a loud voice. Who wants to volunteer? And I know who has loud voices, so I will pick on you. All right, Henry, you're up.
Yeah, Henry.
Where am I going?
You can go to coordinating mechanism. That's fine because it's near you.
Some women have loud voices too.
Oh yeah, there would be. Don't worry. They will be called on.
We already had that.
Yes, I'm the loudest of all.
There's quite a few washing ones here, so I'm not going to.
Don't take all the wash it ones.
No, exactly. I'm going to try and find something.
But try to start one or two pink ones, and for those on the phone, Henry is reading off the challenge with coordinating mechanisms. I'm sorry, the gap in coordinating mechanisms.
I think IRC in Uganda. coalition and alliances, civil society budget advocacy group, good governance working group with the Uganda Water and Sanitation NGO Network, WASNET, and Menstrual Hygiene Management Coalition.
Excellent. Who was that, sorry?
That was IRC in Uganda.
Excellent.
And I also put international interaction, coordinate US NGO sector, general foreign aid, sector-specific messaging and advocacy strategy. Excellent.
That's awesome. And so we have a US and a Uganda example there. I think that's awesome. Can you pick something in orange quickly? So something going forward.
There's only two, so I'll pick both.
Okay, perfect.
SWB advocacy for SDG indicators, and it's anonymous. Helped us, and bringing more health orgs and wash orgs together.
Bring more what orgs?
Health
orgs and wash orgs together. That's GHC.
Global Health Council. Excellent.
Quick question.
Yes.
What is SWB?
The Sweet Soccer Partnership. So we try to channel all our advocacy efforts to the Sweet Soccer Partnership to have a bigger influence.
Great. And since, Henry, while you're, sorry, before you sit down, we also have some yellow ones, which are the big ideas. Can you just pick one of those? Because maybe someone will be able to fill that gap.
It's quite a big Canada.
Awesome.
One was get Canada to join SWA.
All right, good. We'll take that one. Results Canada. Excellent. So that may be you guys, or that may be somebody else. Yeah. Excellent. All right, so we're going to go, who am I going to go? Well, I should ask, do I have any volunteers who would like to speak up? Anyone?
About the thing that we put on a post thing?
No, to read the things.
Oh.
Okay. Oh, okay, so we'll have Ariane, if you want to take grassroots, and then Guy, if you'll take institutionalizing and mainstreaming after. Perfect.
Start with pink?
Yeah, if you can start with one or two pink.
Great. So interaction and water aid, we've got grass tops advocacy currently doing. And then advocacy to local governments in the Dominican Republic to fund circuit rider program.
Excellent.
And
that's Ryan from Onward Consulting.
Okay,
perfect.
This is a really long.
That's okay. We'll just skip that one. We'll come back to it. Who was that? Avina. Excellent. Oh, Lil's going to share that one in just a moment.
So let's move over to, going to do it next year. So Water Action Month, EWP. So that's going to be March. We're working on a public facing campaign around adolescent girls in Canada. Results. Expand membership, EWP.
Great. Wonderful.
And then for great to have, let's do it. We've got stand-up events in major U.S. cities, other major cities, and country programs. When safe, that's water aid. And then reset with grassroots based on SDGs, era, Central America, CRS.
Great. We're going to come back to all of your stuff in just a second, okay? But Avina, I'm going to call on some of you, as I said earlier, about things that I know that you're already doing and that you have planned in the future, to just give some examples that are working. So Guy, you're up. Institutionalizing and mainstreaming advocacy.
Yeah, I got some pink stuff from Water for People and from Water Aid. Water for People talking about developing a global influence strategy for 2017-2020. Pink means you've done that already, right?
Pink is, yeah, you're doing it now.
It's already done.
They're in process. Yep.
And developing their country influence strategies for 2017-2020. One more, I don't really understand it. Institutional development, example, reform sanitation institutions. This is something that Water Aid is.
Oh, Paulus can elaborate.
Yeah, so more like institutional development, like we're working with some governments to set up sanitation directorates, also looking at what the institutional arrangement should look like so that they are better fit for purpose and they'll be able to respond.
Great. And then on orange, I've got stuff from Care, Water Aid, Interaction, WSSCC, the worst acronym in the world. Organisation. Interaction talks about in-country advocacy training strategy development among NGOs. And WSSCC talks about joining initiatives by others to craft the best future for WASH advocacy in the SDG era. Mentioning particular meetings, for example, SACSA. That's the orange. Do you want a green one?
No, we're good on that one. I think we're, all right, any more volunteers? I need 1, 2, 3, 4 volunteers still, so.
I will do that.
Yes, great. If you want to do advocacy with donors, and yell very loudly.
So SWA is already doing joint advocacy with governments on key blockages to progress.
Great.
And WhatsApp and IRC and Tremblay, they are doing public opinions for WASH, knowledge and debate initiative to focus attention on DRM.
Domestic resource mobilization.
Hashtag,
yeah. Great.
Okay,
so yep.
The orange ones, Water Aid, they are donor approaches. They say integration and complementary partners.
Great. So changing the way that they work with donors. Excellent.
And Results Canada is saying they're going to linking WASH to key advocacy moments for nutrition, maternal newborn health, and adolescent growth.
Mm-hmm. Great. That's good. And maybe take one of the 3 of the pie in the sky ideas.
I think this is CARE. They would like to have a joint actor-wide approach with donors, and especially about best practices, like a WASH union.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to set of kind of principles. I don't understand that word. Best practices signed on to by organizations.
Great. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Or do you want to expand? No? Okay. All right. Another volunteer? Anybody? Yes? Okay, Robin, very loudly. Why don't you take distorted messaging?
Fantastic.
Yeah, be loud.
I'll be very loud.
Okay, from Water Aid, better coordination amongst organizations and information sharing, and just pretty much being transparent. Advocacy for...
Wait. We're starting with pink, so start with one or...
that was what you want for the future.
Yeah, so start with one or two, just 1 or 2 of them. Yeah.
Guideline Handbook on Human Rights to WASH, EWP. Interaction, a united voice for global change. Othbo says data collection and with an arrow pointing at knowledge. Brilliant. Rotary International, encouraging service organizations and civil society leaders to be coordinated in their messaging, identify and rally around 1 to 2 key messages. Another one from EWP is organizing regional meetings to realign advocacy plans responsive. And last one, collaborate to influence SDG indicator process, WSSCC.
Great. So if you can choose, there's only 1 orange, so there's 2. Read the 2 orange ones.
Okay, so...
Which is what people are planning in 2016.
What people have planned in 2016 is advocacy for public finance tracking. It's global, several countries, and this is WHO, IRC, SMAVI, Othbo, and
Wetlands International.
Classic. And then more informal networking activities in country to talk to each other.
Great. That's Suzanne. Everything that doesn't have something on it belongs to Trevor.
Under the radar.
That's good.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah. Cool. There's for the folks on the phone and in the room, there is more information that we are reading out loud, but all of that will go into the outcome document that we're preparing. So we want to take more time to hear from you guys. I need 2 more volunteers. Yay! Thanks, Stephanie. can you go to funding for advocacy? Start with pink, and then there's only one orange, so I guess no one's really planning anything in the future. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
In Uganda, IRC is supporting the Ministry of Water and Environment to plan and convene a public finance for WASH meeting in April of 2016.
Awesome.
Results Canada, individual donors funding advocacy landscaping major states.
Great.
You want all these, Ellen, or you want?
No, just those two are good. If you can then go to the orange one.
This is Samavi IRC ACO. It's the Wash It Consortium. Leverage lobby activities in 6 countries and beyond.
Wonderful. And go to one of the two that's something, the pie in the sky.
Pie in the sky from CRS. Suggest to reframe. Embed sector strengthening in organizational strategy so that funding SDG 6 implies institutional building.
Great, thank you. And then I need one last volunteer. I think, did we get, yeah, Courtney, we did all of those. Yeah, all right. So the last one is knowledge sharing and communication. So pick two or so of the pink ones.
Working with government on promoting use of national information management systems. EWP country briefs on WASH. And now orange?
Yeah.
Okay. What's up? What's up will do research with partners designed explicitly to drive increased domestic public finance for WASH. And Rotary, pulling from lessons learned from country global advocacy efforts in polio and transferring to development of advocacy strategies efforts in WASH.
All right, nice job. Thank you very much. So I think we've got everything. The only thing that we've missed is that there was kind of a parking lot one at the front for things that didn't fit in a category. So I'm just going to quickly read off one or two of those. In the theme category of things that people are already doing, What's Up is doing action research with the Urban Institute exploring how to influence municipal governments to increase sanitation budgets. So the research side didn't necessarily fit in to all of these. I might have said in knowledge sharing and communications, but I think that that's great. Welcome, Juice. Nice to see you. And then Water Aid is doing in-country advocacy focused on WASH and all of the other integration issues. I'm not going to read. They have a list of like 15 of them. And then increasing focus from SWA, increasing sanitation and water for all, increasing focus on 4 collaborative behaviors. The 4 collaborative behaviors. And then Water Aid in the future is going to be doing sector strengthening, and then the two kind of pie in the sky things, intersectoral and private sector cooperation, and that's the Wash It folks, maybe, yeah, the organizations, and then bringing research and advocacy together, so research into policy, and that's from What's Up. So great, thank you everybody for your contributions, those on the phone and in the room. So we have about probably about 20 to maybe 30 minutes actually at this point. And so what I'd like to do now is to switch gears slightly from the gaps and kind of some of this identification of gaps to things that people are already doing. So everyone was sent some questions, and some of that's already there. But I want to talk about this more. So what is your organization currently doing in the WASH advocacy space in the next 2 to 5 years? And then do you have funding to support that? So again, a lot of this work has been mapped out and put on sticky notes and stuck on the wall, but those were more, I think, either broad concepts or kind of an overview of what it is. It doesn't get into the specific advocacy that's happening. And I did not warn anyone that I was going to call on them, so it's a surprise thing. But I want to start with a couple of people in the room who I know are doing some really interesting things. and then we'll go to some folks on the phone. And so I want to start with Lil. So Lil is from the Avena Foundation, and so if you can talk about two things, if you could talk about Cloxas, and if you could talk about the recent win, yeah? And talk loudly so everyone can hear you.
Okay. Well, reflecting a little bit about what I've heard here, and I realize that many times you do things that could be part of an advocacy strategy, but you do them without knowing that. It's like you set enabling conditions to then be able to do advocacy. So back in 2011, there was this conference of community water management held in Ecuador, where a Latin American network, Confederation of Community Water Organizations, was created. Cloxas, which is in Spanish, Confederation of Latin American Community Organizations. So this is like the Latin American top structure of a whole system of national federations and local associations of community water organizations that represents this sector, and that is now having a voice among different global and regional spaces to raise the message of community water management and how they have been, you could say, a little bit neglected by our formal structures and by actually the society. Because in our countries, if you ask a regular citizen if they know about community water management, most of them don't know. They think that government takes care of access to water of everyone, and they don't know that there are a lot of people in their countries that dedicate their own time in a voluntary basis to manage the water systems of to provide water to their neighbors. So that's part of the message Cloxas wants to set there. And that year we invited a woman that works at University of Costa Rica to attend that meeting. Okay. Now I'm going to story number 2. Last year we had elections in Costa Rica, and that woman happened to be appointed as the executive director of the water agency, Costa Rican Water Agency. And so Cloxas has make a call to declare one specific day as the Latin American Day of Community Water Management, for it to be celebrated, and it would be a good occasion for the academy institutions, for local governments, and for everyone to celebrate and recognize the work these people do. So they make a public call. They send like by internet support to OAS. Organization of American States. Okay. The request to declare that day. So I shared that to our previous friend from that now is the executive director, the message, and say, okay, we were late this year. We didn't do anything on that day to celebrate. And look how they did in Paraguay. They called their authorities, and now they know that there is this call and that they should celebrate that day. And so she said, okay, let's do something on a public event we are going to have to launch our public policy for the strengthening of community water management, which she has been developing in a participatory process throughout the country. So, and I say, would it be possible that the president signs an executive order to declare that day in Costa Rica? And she said, yes, why not? I don't have time to write it, but if you help us, we can try it. And we did, and it was signed yesterday. While we were having lunch, they were signing that. And so Costa Rica now has its official national for community water management. And I was like about to cry because I was so excited that, you know, it might be a very small thing, but it might mean a lot of things for them.
Okay, cool.
Congratulations. Excellent. All right.
Can you flash that?
Yes. All right. So the other people I'm calling on, Jane, unfortunately I'm calling on you. If you can talk a little bit about the work that you've been doing at the localized level for the increase in the budget. That would be great. Surprise, you didn't know.
Okay. That is IRC and our national network, the Uganda Water and Sanitation Engineering Network, are jointly advocating for the increase in funding for operations and maintenance of rural water supplies and services from specifically 13% to 15%. And those percentages are from the district water and sanitation conditional grant. Every year the ministry sends conditional grants to the districts. And there is a formula that allocates the monies in the district. 70% of the grants, depending on how much a district has received, because of the formula, districts get different amounts. So they look at, these are criteria. So 70% goes to investments, new investments. Only 8% goes to sanitation. And at the moment, only 13% goes to operations and maintenance. And we felt that that is not enough. If you look at the amount that go to the district, and you look at the expectations to ensure that operations and maintenance of those facilities is actually handled well, the monies are not enough. We were already doing that with funding from our respective organizations, but then we got a push, an additional push from a combined force of Avina, Watch Advocates, I can't pronounce the other one, APRAS, to add more in terms of our activities. And the activities mainly so far have included meetings with the functionality thematic working group. This is a group in the Ministry of Water and Environment where people congregate and talk about O&M issues only and how to improve O&M. Engaging with the Uganda Parliamentary Forum on WASH. We have a very strong parliamentary forum that has, at the moment, for the last quarter, presented motions on the floor of Parliament to improve WASH, to improve menstrual hygiene management, to improve hand washing. So that is a good partner that we are working with, and we have a meeting in Parliament next month on, I think, the 15th, where all these members of Parliament will come together, and it will be addressed by the Speaker of Parliament. And one of the things we are pushing is still increasing funds for O&M. We did a video documentary where we went to 4 districts that had their functionality rates very low and talked to the users and talked to the local government officials and talked to everybody there who is concerned about O&M, and we documented that. It's on our website, ircwash.org, and it basically talks about that. And we are using that now in different fora. We shared it at the Joint Sector Review, 6, 7, and 8. Actually, it was on the 8th of October, where we had over 200 people that viewed that documentary. And it's really basics. People talk about what is what they are concerned with O&M, hand pump mechanics, talking about how they are struggling to actually do routine maintenance because some of these areas are very far, they don't have transport, issues of the supply chain. And that one we shared at the Joint Technical Review. We also shared it at the Civil Society Forum. Every year we have a WASH Civil Society Forum, and still the message is the same. So we have consistently made sure that the message is increased O&M funds. We've presented it to the Sector Finance Working Group, and IRC is the secretariat of the Sector Finance Working Group, and we are saying we need to talk about these things. This is the evidence, not only in the video, but a lot of research has already been done by our partner organizations, WaterAid, Water for People, AMREF, World Vision. They've all done a lot of research, and there's evidence to show that if you don't increase at least some funding for O&M, then you have problems still going back and saying, oh, this is not functioning, you know, and this needs to be done. So we are continuing with the advocacy work. It will cross over to 2016. Changing policies is hard, but increasing money is even harder. And we know that. But we still prepare to push. We are getting more partners on board, specifically through our Agenda for Change partnership with WaterAid and Water for People and Rotary Wash Plus and International Lifeline Fund and the Ministry of Water and Environment. The Rural Water Department of the Ministry is actually, I would say, the one spearheading it. They just don't want to be at the forefront because they are civil servants. But they'll tell us, they whisper to us that, no, you talk about this, you can talk about it, we cannot. So just say it. When you say it, they'll, for you, even if they abuse you, it's okay. So that is what we are doing specifically under that, on that consumer advocacy issue. And actually this week, yesterday, colleagues from the office and from the Uganda Water and Sanitation NGO network held public dialogues in 2 districts. One that has a functionality rate that is above 90, and then another one that is still struggling at 47%. So they split up. We have 2 groups, each going to the different districts, showing the video and holding discussions. And then we are putting together a policy brief. So we have one policy brief out, which is also on our website, but we're putting together another policy brief. And this one, we are now specifically targeting the Parliamentary Committee on Natural Resources. It's the one that approves the plans and budgets of our ministry. So that's the kind of advocacy we're doing. It's very mild. It's okay. There's no tear gas. We're not doing now. So I think we are, and when they tell us that like you can't meet the Parliamentary Committee on Natural Resources, we were supposed to do that in September, but we consulted the ministry and they said, this is the same committee that passes our plans and budgets. You can't just go in. Why don't you wait until we sort out a few things, and we also want to be part of you. And we said, well, it's okay. So we went with 2 principal engineers early this month, and we met the committee. There are only 21 people, but 21 in that meeting, I think there were about 12 of them, but I actually felt like the room was so full because everybody was asking so many things. And if you work with members of parliament, some of them can really go off tangents, and it's sometimes hard. So it's you to provide that information and enable them to be with you. So that's basically what we do.
Great, thank you. So we have probably another 10, 15 minutes or so. I'm going to ask that for some assistance at the very end, the last couple of minutes. We completely destroyed the room the way that it was set up, and we have to put it all back. So if people, we can get a couple of volunteers to everyone kind of take their chair, move them out of the way, we'll move some tables. I would appreciate that at the very end, because otherwise Jordan and I will do it all on our own, and that would be sad. So in the meantime, can I ask for some other volunteers to just talk about some of the work that you're doing? To get as many folks as possible. Let's, we want to go a little more in depth than what's on a sticky note, but think, you've got 2 sticky notes to talk about what you're doing. So who would like to go next? So many volunteers. Thanks, guys. Anybody? Anybody? Yeah, please.
Well, I'm for the guys on the phone. I'm Nanneke from Simavi. We are actually setting up a project now in Indonesia. We have done some CLTS there, and actually there's now 1.4 million people actually having access to toilets. So we have a great job. It was underground, it is operational management, it's all rounded. But it needs to be really sustained on the political level now. So we're now working on the district level and actually doing the advocacy that the district level people, and actually also above it on province level, that they take their stake in actually maintaining what's there built, what is now on the ground, so that they do take their responsibility. And so that is actually something that we are going to start in 2016.
Great.
I forgot to put that on a sticky note.
You can always have sticky notes. Who would like to go next? Yeah, Carlos, please.
Okay, so we're doing something that we call the district-wide approach, and it's actually about looking at the district as a whole, or what you might call the territory. So in some countries it's a district, or it's a commune, or it's a local government, or whatever. So we're looking at it as a whole, and we're thinking about us acting as facilitators and catchers rather than us reaching, because we're just one organization, right? And so we're connecting with partners and then ensuring that we're not doing what you might necessarily call a WASH plan, but we're rather looking at the local development plan, and where WASH sits within that local development plan, and how we're ensuring that whatever development initiatives are happening, it's not left out, so to speak, but rather, sort of central, and also contributing to reducing poverty in that district. So it's working with the district, working with other partners who might be doing things on education, on climate change, or on housing and urban and housing, and or sort of women's development and all that, and bringing it all together with WASH, so that it's a holistic development approach, and it's in line with how we want to see where we contribute to sort of delivering the SDGs from the local level to the national level. So we've done some studies, and we've done our research, and we're now set.
Great. Exciting. Jordan. Great. Alison, why don't you go ahead and unmute your phone or computer?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so a couple of us, it's a consortium. What I'm going to discuss is about human rights, water and sanitation projects that EWP, Rural Water Supply Network, WaterAid, WASH United, UNICEF, and Institute of Sustainable Futures have just gotten a funding, about £200,000 from the Lottery Code, which is a British-based organization, to do work on translating the handbook of the special rapporteur into a language that is kind of friendly for professionals and water politicians at district level, as well as service providers. So this consortium, we just got the money. We'll start doing commissioning a couple of consultants to develop the manuals and training materials for this. So it's something that will reach out to the wider organizations who are working in WASH and are interested in human rights approach to water and sanitation. It's not just the consortium, so I'm just raising this so that people would know that this is coming up, and when we approach you to contribute, or when we come to your district or country or zone, you should welcome us We just want to contribute to pushing the human rights-based approach on water a bit further. And coupled to this is a roundtable conference, not for about 30 people. We'll be organizing in March to look at the relationship between water and sanitation, food and housing, and using the human rights-based approach lens. We've changed our global month of action, which usually is World Works for Water. Now it is rebranded and is called Water Action Month. So would be encouraging everybody to participate in next year March. It's a whole month. You can do anything that you want. You can do some lobbying and stuff like that and not just walk. So we think that the walk was too narrow and we need people to do different things that they are comfortable in doing. So.
Great, thank you. So he's recruiting. Henry, go ahead.
Just curious, so we're trying to do kind of knowledge building around open data, common indicator sets, common standards, kind of things around that to improve the quality of information that we use subsequently for advocacy. So kind of initiatives such as the Water Data Exchange, WPX, and things like that to try and bring the community together. So I think from our point of view, it would be great to hear from everyone here offline later if you have items like that can kind of contribute to a knowledge base. So we can begin to try and bring some of this together so we can start to get common indicators, start to increase the amount of data that's looking accessible via privacy and obviously considerations, but things like that so we can try and kind of bring some of the knowledge and data together.
Great. Yes. Oh, sorry. Sally and then Mark.
Just very quickly, building on the earlier conversation about the SWA and the commitments that are made. Previously, that was done every 2 years. So the last commitments were made in 2014, and then the first report on progress that was being made on those commitments came out in September this year. So what we did after that was to organize webinars with some of the partners that I think some are on the phone, some could be in the room here, with individual governments to ask, you made 6 commitments and 1 or 5 or 3 of these are not doing very well. Which one do you really want to focus on in this coming year? And then they would pick one and then they would say, we think that the main person or the main institution that can unblock the progress here is maybe the Minister of Finance. Mm-hmm. So then they would, we asked them to develop a plan with all the partners that they were with on the table and share some type of growth. So one example I want to give is Nigeria, where they said that they want now to engage the new government and try and to get the new officials to understand the commitments. I don't think they have a minister yet, but they wanted to do that also at state level. When they have requested if they could have information on the economic briefing on the benefits of investing in water and sanitation for each of the states. So that's an opportunity for sort of other partners to take on and help a country like that, where the government says we want to engage with the lower level of government and sort of bring them on to speed with this issue. And then they have a specific need that they've highlighted. So that's just one example, but it could be about 3 others, including Gambia, where they managed to get the president to issue a declaration on open communication.
That's awesome. That's great. You know, it's interesting. I'm hearing, Mark, sorry, really quick before you go. It's interesting to hear a lot of these are almost like calls for action for others to engage, which I think is a really good, you know, you've got a network of other people who are here. So these are great. And if there's a way that, you know, in the time that WASH Advocates is still here, that we, you know, to send things out to the group that was here or others that we know are engaged in advocacy that might be able to fill some of those gaps. If you know, we're happy to do that to the end of the time that we're around. But Mark, go ahead.
Sure, yeah, thanks. I was just going to say that, it occurs to me that we're at a time with the adoption of SDG 6 that what is really most needed is kind of country-level working groups that focus on SDG 6, much like what Jane has described to us, right? In Uganda is a really interesting case. I've only been once, and I spent some time with Kate Nemanja there, and it just occurred to me how it seems like the sector is really relatively well organized as compared to some other countries. But what we're talking about in Uganda has to be multiplied by how many? 192 time, 192 countries, and we as an organization, Water for People, we're only working in 9 of those countries. But I'm not sure if it's SWA or if it's UNICEF or if it's WHO who really can kind of work with the relevant ministries to convene these working groups in each of these 193 countries to achieve SDG 6. And the only other thing to add to that was just to build a little bit off of Apollos' comments on the district level work, which is so critical, that linkage between national and district. I'm really, the word sustainable in the SDG to me goes right back to the service authority issue, which we haven't talked a lot about. At least I haven't heard a lot about that in this conference. In the previous days, we've talked a lot about service providers and great work that Avina's been doing in Latin America, but the service authority level, there's such a huge gap for work capacity. Just creation of service authorities. In Peru, we think probably only 1/3 of the total number of service authorities that should exist actually exist. So it's shocking the need out there to create and strengthen service authorities at district level. So building a little bit off the walls there. So that working group can, if those country level working groups could focus on that as a key issue, it would be a much better place. Just a couple of thoughts.
Great. Erin.
So I'm with Interaction. Those of you that aren't familiar, we're the coalition of U.S. NGOs. So we have 190 members, and they work in all sectors, not just WASH. So we do general budget appropriations, lobbying, U.S. Congress, as well as legislative. But within the WASH sphere, we manage the WASH working group, which focuses directly on water sanitation appropriations and legislation and integrating. But definitely looking forward in the future to thinking a little more global in our advocacy efforts. So partnering with SWA on this commitment, partnering with other international NGOs on some of the work they're doing at the UN level, but then also trying to develop and see how we could get our members, field staff, to plug into the kind of in-country working groups that are WASH specific that could really help bring a voice on some of the SDG mobilization. So it's definitely something we're looking into and hoping to figure out how to do that in the future.
Great. Yeah.
Catherine would like to say something.
Great. Catherine, the floor is yours.
As you may be aware, in Kenya, in the last few years, we have got the county governments, 47 in number, and there's a very big gap in terms of legislation regarding WASH, water and sanitation and hygiene promotion. So what we have been doing as QUAHO, my organization, so far we are working with 3 counties to capacity build them even to know how to enact legislation regarding WASH, and linking them to the national water policy, water legislation, which is still in the Senate. But we realize that there's a gap because most of the members of the General Assembly at the county level do not know how even to enact legislation or the processes of enacting a legislation. So we are happy to say that so far we have done in 3 counties. But our move forward, of course, depends on the availability of funding, which we keep on looking around to fundraise. Then we have also realized that there are some key issues. For example, the menstrual hygiene management. The government has made statements and even distributed cards to different schools. But there is completely no policy, no legislation regarding menstrual hygiene promotion. So QUAHO, we managed to put together a number of organizations, really big organizations, and we are happy to say that even we are being supported by the Water Supply and Sanitation Collaborative Council. Even China was just in our country the other day with the key organizations, QUAHO being one of them, to come up with the policy in the first place. So really, if in WASH, if there's no legislation, then these county governments cannot move forward. And I think that's what I just want to say in terms of enacting the policy. And we hope to do that in the next more than even 5 years, because as I say, there are 47 counties, and there's a very big gap that needs to be filled by organizations like ours. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Catherine. John Sparks.
All right. How little energy I have left. Let me see here. I'm convinced that our own members. We have 16, as I mentioned before, the varying degrees, their country offices, and as I said, they are in 90 countries, more. I'm convinced that half of them, probably more than half of them, aren't talking to each other about what they are doing in the advocacy field. If nothing else I get done this blasted year, or coming year, I would like to at least know what the hell they are doing. And so my goals are quite modest. I want to know rather than not know what organizations are already doing. If I achieve that, that will be a real page turner in my life. So just knowing what they are doing and not doing with each other in country. I'm not talking about the headquarters in Denver or in Washington or in New York, where I'm talking about all of our country offices. If I had a handle on what they really feel they've gotten done or trying to do, no embarrassment attaching to how little it may be in some respects. If I can get an assessment of what they really are doing, that alone will kind of change, if you were having this conversation in a year from now, what I could bring to the table in the way of knowledge. And so that's one thing. The second thing, I think from MWA's point of view, I don't know. We'll see what the board says, Patrick. But I want us to focus a little more on water quality issues with our members. I'm really worried about water quality. I have a strong suspicion that a lot of stuff out there is just not as good as some people say it is. And I'm worried about that. And I'm worried about, I'm not worried about, but I do want to seize on the opportunity along with a number of other people. In a good meeting we were at a couple of weeks ago in Washington, it was discussed here at the conference also about healthcare facilities. It's shocking. This is a tremendous organizing political advocacy tool for us as an entire sector. The health community needs to be in front of it, but we need to push and help and be part of that. And it can't be a Washington issue, but it's got to be knowledge and advocacy. So I really want us to be involved in that. MWA, for its own part, do you have funding to support that work? Yes, I do. So I have funding to do a number of other things, I think. Basically, we're going to, as far as the Washington stuff is concerned, the U.S. advocacy, we, the small coalition that has been extraordinarily and obscenely successful in some ways the last few years. We don't want to lose anything, so we have a maintenance of effort, but I really think country advocacy, supporting country advocacy is really where we need to put most of our work. And I think the MWA members, even the ones that kind of sit around the table and sort of nod their heads and don't really do it, but I think they do agree with it, and I think we're moving more and more in that direction. I think that's our real priority.
Great. So we are almost out of time, and so I'm sorry that we don't have the opportunity for everyone to speak, but please feel free to email us things that you're doing too that may not be listed so that we can make sure that that information is documented. I'm going to turn it over quickly to Patrick to just give us a couple of key highlights from this session, and then I'll close us out, and then I would again encourage everyone to help us move furniture. Thank you.
Thank you.
Come on down.
Nice quiet little voice, huh?
I
Happens at the end after the normal, I need to get out there, and I catch any of you talking to each other and coffee or detention for a week. Yeah, look, I sit on this. At the start of the week, I don't know if anyone saw, but there was that session, a couple of interesting sessions. I mean, there was the Dominic Dwell talk where he basically showed that aid has absolutely no effect whatsoever on development, and that really if you want to give everybody water and sanitation and lift them out of poverty, you want to have a relatively authoritarian development-focused government that just is competent to get on with stuff, like in China, like Rwanda seems to have now, where we see great stuff happening. But I think there was another graph, I can't remember if it was Jamie Barton, or it may even have been in the pre-convening that we went to with the Hilton folks before, which showed global investment into the sector. And a lot of us around here are NGO folks, and I'm particularly talking to us, and I think we're the ones who tend to be into advocacy.
There's a request that you get closer to the
Oh,
so
sorry.
I'm actually going to have you go back.
I'm going to project.
Yeah, go back and just sit in your seat.
And that showed in the graph 1%, and maybe it's wrong. Maybe it's 0.5%, maybe it's 2%. And this isn't what Greg Allgood was saying on the panel yesterday, for those who heard him. 1% of global investment in WASH is coming through NGOs. It's completely insignificant. So if anyone in an NGO thinks that the benefit they're bringing, including World Vision, the contribution that they bring to the world is by delivering services, they're deluded. yes, in the county you work in, you may well be very important, but there's 190 other counties in the country, and you're not there. So, because where is this all coming from? It's about what's the advocacy about? Why are we doing the advocacy? And I think if there's one thing that everyone's been talking about, the SDGs. It's the SDGs and it's a change. And like I said on the panel yesterday, if anyone was there, it's not that the change starts now. The fact that those stupid things have been signed up to means the change is already well underway. So if I look at the kind of the hashtags or the buzzwords or whatever coming out of this conference, it's systems change, it's systems building, it's national leadership, it's domestic resource mobilization, it's monitoring and data and access to data, it's professionalization of the sector, and it's evidence, and it's policy, evidence-based advocacy. And I think that's what I've been hearing around here a lot from the stories, is that when that advocacy is great, but advocacy has to be built into something. And I really like the point, that Mark was saying. That's certainly where I see it, where we see it as RC and our partners, and that's why if you read about this initiative that we're lucky enough to have got funded by the Dutch government, it's largely focused into countries, because I believe strongly that advocacy, the next step in advocacy is that it's embedded in programs, that those programs are focused on change, that they are not just about advocacy, that they're about trying stuff out on the ground, using our implementation as labs, using those labs to prove stuff, taking the evidence from that proof of concept and seeing what that says to national policy and bringing it to the policymakers. But we don't even have to bring it to them because we've involved them in that work on the ground in the first place, which means that everybody's an advocate on one level. Having said which, the one thing I've learned from interacting with you guys over the years, and you, Ellen, in particular, and WASH advocates, but also you, John, and talking to people who are professional advocates, which I'm certainly not, is that there's a level of professionalism and rigor that can be brought to this that can make it our work, everybody's work, so much more effective in this. And it's the stuff. Tanvi's gone now, but great case study yesterday of how they've mapped out, helped WUSIP to create an advocacy strategy to engage with the local municipalities and to just be systematic and professional about it. I always love, if anyone has a chance, talk to these guys who've been involved in lobbying Congress here. That's something. One of my take-homes is I keep thinking I want to get going in the Netherlands with Somalian folks who are already doing it with a bit, but take the lobbying, the political lobbying in our host countries to the level that you guys have been doing it here, and get the sort of achievements you have had with the Water for the World Act and pushing WASH up the agenda. So, yeah, I think really that's it. The SDGs, it is changing. It is changing, and advocacy has to change with it. It has to be embedded. It has to be country-led. It's about all of us getting in the sandbox together and playing nicely together. And yes, we all have to get the money in. Yes, we all have to point to what we want to do. But collaborating, be it through MWA or whatever else, depending on the country, getting our advocacy efforts and skilled aligned in building the capacity of our local partners to keep doing that is where it's going. And I think just in closing out, I'm going to say thank you, Ellen, for organising this, and the one yesterday, and the one in Stockholm. I think it's a real, on the one hand, your presentation yesterday was very good on that. It's a real shame that you guys are sunsetting. I think that's a pity. But at the same time, it's not a catastrophe, because I think you and all the other people you've inspired have done an amazing job in lifting the capacity overall of the sector to do advocacy in this space.
So I just want to thank everyone. For those on the phone, I know it's very late, and so appreciate your patience. And those in the room who've stuck around for the last 3 hours, thank you so much. Next steps, just based on what's here today, we're going to do a write-up of the outcomes from today, and we'll send that around to everyone. And then we're looking at, we would like your feedback on the landscape. So please send that. And then the last thing is we're talking with a couple of different folks to figure out where a lot of these resources and documents that we've done are all coming together. So